Mr. Blackwell needs this cream applied twice daily. Jefferson Burke set his fingers pressing the Swiss jar into the nurse's hands with practiced insistence. It's the only thing that doesn't irritate his skin. Angela Morrison froze in the doorway, mop handle gripped tight. Her eyes locked onto those yellowing fingernails, that distinctive pattern of hair loss, the metallic sheen on the cream jar's rim. 15 years of dormant chemistry knowledge exploded in her mind like a firework. Thallium. 20 specialists couldn't save him, but nobody was listening to the black woman who cleaned their floors. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Stay with me until the end of this incredible true story, and comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Angela's story travels. Now let's begin. Angela Morrison's hands moved on autopilot, wringing the mop across the marble floors of Johns Hopkins Medical Center's executive wing. Third floor, room 347. Same suite she'd cleaned for 6 weeks straight. Same beeping machines. Same scent of antiseptic and expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask something else. Something wrong. Liver enzymes are climbing again. Dr. Marcus Thornton announced, his silver hair catching the ambient lighting as he addressed the cluster of specialists surrounding Victor Blackwell's bed. We're missing something fundamental here. Angela kept her head down, kept moving. Invisible. That's what 15 years of housekeeping had taught her: how to exist in rooms without disrupting them, how to hear everything while being seen as nothing. Could be autoimmune, suggested Dr. Raymond Park, the youngest of the group, barely 40, with round glasses that made him look perpetually surprised. Some rare presentation we haven't. We've run every autoimmune panel twice. Dr. Thornton cut him off, frustration bleeding through his usually controlled tone. This is our 6th week. Victor Blackwell is dying and we don't know why. Angela's fingers tightened on the mop handle. 6 weeks. 6 weeks of watching America's richest tech entrepreneur deteriorate in a suite that cost more per night than she made in a month. 6 weeks of counting symptoms that the specialists discussed like puzzle pieces they couldn't fit together. The neuropathy is progressing upward, added Dr. Sarah Chen, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun that matched her tight expression. Starting in his feet now, affecting his hands. Textbook ascending pattern, but textbook for what? Angela moved to the bathroom, the conversation continuing behind her. She'd learned to time her cleaning to their rounds. They talked more freely when they thought she wasn't listening, or rather, when they forgot she could hear at all. Inside the bathroom, Angela's eyes swept across the marble countertop. Expensive grooming products lined up like soldiers, Italian aftershave, French face cream, and that Swiss hand cream in the distinctive black jar with gold lettering. Crème de Lausanne. She'd seen Jefferson Burke bring it last week, and the week before, and the week before that. I brought Victor's favorite hand cream, Burke had said, each time his voice carrying that particular resonance of old money and older grudges. Swiss-made, the only brand that doesn't irritate his sensitive skin. Angela picked up the jar, careful not to disturb its position. Heavy, substantial, the kind of luxury that announced itself. She unscrewed the cap, inhaling carefully. Nothing, but the metallic sheen when light hit it at certain angles. Angela, are you almost finished? A nurse poked her head in Jessica, one of the few who bothered learning her name. We need the room. 2 minutes. Angela said softly, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. She screwed the cap back on, positioned it exactly where it had been, and backed out of the bathroom. Her chemistry degree, the one she'd never finished, the one that lived in a cardboard box under her bed alongside all her other abandoned dreams, suddenly felt very present in her mind. In the main room, Victor Blackwell lay propped against pillows that probably cost more than her car. At 56, he should have been vital commanding. Instead, he looked 70 skin, sallow hair, thinning in patches that weren't quite random fingernails, yellowed in a way that made Angela's trained eye itch with recognition. Mr. Blackwell, Dr. Thornton was saying, his voice taking on that particular gentleness reserved for delivering bad news. We're going to try a different approach to your treatment. We believe. You believe nothing. Blackwell rasped his voice, a shadow of the booming baritone that had once commanded boardrooms. 6 weeks, Marcus. 6 weeks and 20 doctors, and I'm still dying. We're exploring every possibility. Explore faster. Angela wheeled her cart toward the door, but her eyes couldn't stop cataloging. The way his hands trembled when he reached for water. The distinctive pattern of hair loss, not circular like alopecia, not diffuse like chemotherapy, but scattered. Random, yet somehow patterned. She knew that pattern. She'd seen it in a textbook 15 years ago in Professor Harrison's advanced toxicology seminar. The semester before her parents' car accident. The semester before everything changed. "Excuse me." Angela's voice came out smaller than she intended. No one looked up. She cleared her throat. "Excuse me, The cleaning staff needs to finish quickly," Dr. Thornton announced to his team, still not looking at Angela. "We have important consultations to complete." Angela's jaw tightened. She pushed her cart into the hallway, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft click that felt like a period at the end of a sentence she hadn't finished writing. In the corridor, she leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. Her mind was racing, connecting dots, drawing lines between symptoms that 20 specialists were treating as separate conditions. Peripheral neuropathy, ascending, check. Alopecia in a scattered pattern, check. Gastrointestinal issues. She'd overheard the nurses discussing his constant nausea, check. Yellowing nails, gum discoloration, cognitive decline that everyone attributed to stress and medication, check, check, check. "You look like you've seen a ghost," said Maria, another housekeeper pushing her cart past. "Bad shift." "No," Angela said automatically. Then Maria, "If you knew something important, but nobody would listen to you, what would you do?" Maria laughed, the sound tired and knowing. "Honey, I've been cleaning hospitals for 22 years. Nobody listens to us unless we're in the way. That's just how it is." She disappeared around the corner, leaving Angela alone with her racing thoughts and the certain knowledge that Victor Blackwell was being poisoned. Thallium poisoning. The perfect murder weapon for someone patient enough to use it. Colorless, odorless, tasteless, absorbed through skin contact, causing symptoms that mimicked everything from autoimmune disorders to neurological diseases to simple stress-related illness. And the hand cream that Jefferson Burke brought so religiously, so insistently, would be the perfect delivery system. Angela pulled out her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Google, then the Johns Hopkins Medical Library database. She still had access from a volunteer program 3 years ago that no one had bothered to revoke. Thallium toxicity symptoms. The results loaded, and Angela's breath caught in her throat. Every single symptom matched. Every single one. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter, Tasha. "Mom, Marcus needs help with his math." "When are you home?" Angela checked the time. 11:47 p.m. Her shift ended at 6 a.m., 6 more hours of being invisible while a man died from something she could name but couldn't prove. She typed back, "Soon, baby. Help him best you can. Love you." Another text, this one from her supervisor. "Angela Blackwell's suite needs terminal cleaning tomorrow. Schedule adjusted. Report at 8 p.m. Terminal cleaning, the deep clean they did after patients died. They were already planning for it." Angela's hands shook as she pocketed her phone. She had less than 24 hours. The doctor's lounge was supposed to be off-limits to housekeeping staff, but Angela had learned years ago that if you pushed a cleaning cart with enough purpose, you could go almost anywhere. People saw the cart, not the person pushing it. At 1:30 a.m., the lounge was empty, except for Dr. Sarah Chen, hunched over a laptop with 2 empty coffee cups flanking her keyboard like sentries. Angela knocked softly on the doorframe. Dr. Chen looked up, her eyes bloodshot and exhausted. "Oh, you don't need to clean in here tonight. I'll be gone soon." "I'm not here to clean." Angela's voice came out stronger than she expected. "I'm here about Victor Blackwell." Dr. Chen's expression shifted from exhaustion to confusion. "I'm sorry, I don't." "He's being poisoned," Angela said. "Thallium poisoning. All his symptoms match perfectly. The ascending neuropathy, the hair loss pattern, the gastrointestinal issues, the yellowing nails. Wait, slow down." Dr. Chen held up a hand. "You're a housekeeper, right? I appreciate your concern, but I was a chemistry student at Georgetown," Angela interrupted. "Scholarship recipient 3.9 GPA, specializing in toxicology before I had to drop out. I know what I'm looking at." Dr. Chen's face softened with something that might have been pity. That's impressive. But we've run comprehensive toxicology panels, multiple times. If there was poisoning, standard tox screens don't catch thallium unless you're specifically looking for it, Angela pressed. It stays below detection thresholds if administered in small, regular doses, but the cumulative effect is lethal. Dr. Chen closed her laptop, and Angela felt a flicker of hope. Maybe someone was finally listening. "Look," Dr. Chen said gently, "I understand you want to help, but Dr. Thornton and his team have decades of experience. If there was something obvious like poisoning, it's not obvious unless you know what to look for." Angela's voice rose, frustration bleeding through. "The hand cream, the Swiss hand cream that Jefferson Burke brings every week. I've watched him apply it to Mr. Blackwell's hands personally. Thallium absorbs through skin contact. It's the perfect—" "Angela." Dr. Chen stood, her tone shifting from gentle to firm. "You're talking about accusing Jefferson Burke, a respected businessman, and Mr. Blackwell's friend of attempted murder, based on what your undergraduate studies from 15 years ago." The words hit Angela like a slap. She stepped back, her cheeks burning. "I'm sorry." Dr. Chen continued softer now. "I really am. But you can't make accusations like that. It's not appropriate, and honestly, if you keep pushing this, you could lose your job." Angela swallowed hard. "So I should just watch him die?" "You should trust that trained medical professionals are doing everything possible." Dr. Chen picked up her laptop. "I need to get back to the floor. Please, please don't mention this to anyone else, for your own sake." She left, and Angela stood alone in the doctor's lounge, surrounded by leather chairs and mahogany tables and the smell of expensive coffee she wasn't allowed to drink. The institutional barrier between her world and theirs had never felt more solid. At 3:15 a.m., Angela made a decision that would either save Victor Blackwell's life or destroy hers. She returned to the third floor to the supply closet tucked between the emergency exit and the staff bathroom. Inside, alongside industrial-strength cleaners and boxes of gloves, she began assembling what she needed. Baking soda from the break room, aluminum foil from the cafeteria, distilled water from the housekeeping supply, iodine from the first aid kit. Her hands moved with muscle memory from a different life. The life where she'd been Angela Morrison, Georgetown, chemistry prodigy, not Angela Morrison, third-shift housekeeper with 3 kids and a mountain of debt. She needed a sample of the hand cream. But more than that, she needed proof that even Dr. Thornton couldn't dismiss. The chemistry was simple, elegant even. Sodium rhodizonate reacted with thallium to produce a distinctive color change, violet to blue to brown depending on concentration. She didn't have sodium rhodizonate, but she could synthesize a rough approximation using what she had access to. It wouldn't hold up in a proper lab, but it would be enough to prove she wasn't crazy. At 4:00 a.m., Angela slipped back into Blackwell's suite. The night nurse was at the station down the hall. Blackwell himself was sleeping, his breathing shallow and labored. Angela moved to the bathroom on silent feet. The hand cream sat exactly where Burke had left it yesterday, positioned prominently on the counter like an offering. She pulled a small sample container from her pocket, stolen from the lab disposal on the second floor, and carefully scooped a tiny amount of cream into it, less than a gram, barely noticeable. Her heart hammered so loud she was certain it would wake Blackwell, but he didn't stir. Back in the supply closet, Angela set up her makeshift laboratory on an overturned bucket. She mixed solutions with the precision of someone who'd spent hundreds of hours in chemistry labs, measuring by eye and instinct when she lacked proper tools. The cream dissolved in the solvent. She added her improvised reagent drop by drop, watching the color shift with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Violet, then blue, then a deep, unmistakable brown. "Oh my God," Angela whispered to the empty closet. "Oh my God, I was right." She photographed everything with her phone, the setup, the color change, the cream container. Evidence. Proof. Truth. Now she just had to figure out how to make someone believe her. At 5:30 a.m., Angela was sitting in her car in the parking garage staring at her phone when it rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her thumb slide across the screen. Is this Angela Morrison? A woman's voice, professional and unfamiliar. Yes. This is Rachel Kim from hospital administration. We need you to come to the main office before your shift tonight. There's been a complaint filed against you. Angela's stomach dropped. A complaint. We'll discuss it in person. 6 p.m. Don't be late. The line went dead. Angela sat in the dark car watching early morning light creep across the concrete and knew that Dr. Chen had reported her. Of course she had. Angela had crossed a line, and now there would be consequences. She looked down at her phone at the photos of her makeshift chemistry test, at the proof that would either vindicate her or cement her reputation as a conspiracy theorist who couldn't stay in her lane. Her daughter texted Marcus, got an A on his quiz. He's so happy. An A on a quiz. While Angela was about to lose her job for doing exactly what she'd trained to do, recognize patterns, identify problems, save lives. She pulled up her email and typed quickly before she could second-guess herself. To Dr. Marcus Thornton, Chief of Internal Medicine. Subject: Urgent, Victor Blackwell case. Dr. Thornton, I am writing to inform you that Victor Blackwell is suffering from thallium poisoning. I have conducted preliminary testing on the Swiss hand cream provided by Jefferson Burke and confirmed the presence of thallium compounds. All of Mr. Blackwell's symptoms are consistent with chronic thallium toxicity. I understand this is an unusual communication, but Mr. Blackwell's life is in immediate danger. A focused thallium test will confirm my findings. Treatment should begin with Prussian blue immediately. Respectfully, Angela Morrison, Environmental Services Technician, former Georgetown University chemistry student, 2006 to 2007. Her finger hovered over the send button. This would either save a life or end her career. Maybe both. She pressed send. Angela spent the day in a fog of anxiety and determination. She picked up her kids from her mother's apartment, made them lunch, helped with homework, all while her phone sat on the counter like a bomb waiting to explode. No response from Dr. Thornton. No calls from administration beyond the scheduled meeting. Nothing. At 5:45 p.m., Angela put on her uniform and drove back to Johns Hopkins, her hands steady on the wheel even though her insides were churning. The administration office was on the first floor, tucked behind the main lobby, with its soaring ceilings and marble columns. Angela had cleaned those columns 100 times, but had never been inside the office itself. Rachel Kim was younger than Angela expected, maybe 35, with a sleek black suit and an expression that gave nothing away. Ms. Morrison, please sit. Angela sat. We received a complaint that you've been discussing confidential patient information with medical staff making unfounded medical claims and suggesting inappropriate theories about patient care. I was trying to help. Your housekeeping staff, Rachel interrupted, not unkindly. You're not qualified to make medical judgments. Dr. Chen reported that you made serious accusations about a patient's visitor accusations that could constitute slander if repeated. Angela's throat tightened. Did Dr. Thornton read my email? Rachel's eyebrows rose. You emailed the chief of medicine about Victor Blackwell's case. Yes. Rachel sighed, pulling up something on her computer. She read silently, her expression shifting from neutral to something Angela couldn't quite read. Ms. Morrison, she finally said, this puts us in a difficult position. You've overstepped your role significantly. However, she paused. Your educational background is noted in your file. Georgetown chemistry program, is that correct? Yes, but I didn't finish. Why not? The question caught Angela off guard. My parents died in a car accident. I had 3 younger siblings to support. I withdrew to take care of them. Rachel nodded slowly, making a note. I'm going to be frank with you. If you were any other employee, you'd be terminated immediately. But your email, the detail level suggests you know what you're talking about. So here's what's going to happen. Angela held her breath. "You're suspended pending investigation. Paid leave. You're not to discuss this with anyone, not to return to the third floor, not to contact any medical staff. If your claims are substantiated, we'll revisit your employment status. If they're not..." She left the threat hanging. "But Mr. Blackwell will be evaluated by his medical team. That's all I can tell you." Rachel stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Go home, Ms. Morrison. We'll be in touch." Angela drove home in a daze, suspended possibly, about to be fired, her credibility in ruins. But she'd done what she could. She'd sent the email. Now she just had to wait and see if anyone would actually listen. At 9:47 p.m., Angela was helping Marcus with his science homework when her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. "Hello? Ms. Morrison, this is Dr. Raymond Park from Johns Hopkins." His voice was rushed, excited. "Your email, Dr. Thornton, showed it to the team. We ran a focused thallium test. You were right. You were completely right." Angela's legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the kitchen floor. "We found elevated thallium levels in Mr. Blackwell's blood and urine. We're starting Prussian blue treatment now. The FBI is being contacted regarding Jefferson Burke." Dr. Park paused. "Ms. Morrison, you saved his life. 20 specialists missed what you saw. How did you..." "I was invisible," Angela whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I saw everything because no one saw me." "Well, we see you now," Dr. Park said quietly. "Dr. Thornton wants to speak with you tomorrow. And Ms. Morrison, thank you. Thank you for not giving up." After she hung up, Angela sat on her kitchen floor and cried huge, gulping sobs that she'd been holding back for 6 weeks, for 15 years, for a lifetime of being invisible. Marcus and Tasha found her there, and she pulled them close, holding them tight. "Mom, what's wrong?" Tasha asked, worried. "Nothing," Angela said, laughing through her tears. "Nothing's wrong. Everything's going to be okay." For the first time in years, she believed it. The next morning, Angela Morrison walked into Johns Hopkins Medical Center through the front doors, not the service entrance. She wore her best dress, 5 years old, but clean and pressed, and carried a folder with her Georgetown transcripts, her makeshift chemistry test documentation, and a letter she'd written at 3 a.m. outlining exactly how she'd identified the poisoning. The receptionist directed her to the executive conference room on the 4th floor. Inside, 20 doctors waited. Dr. Marcus Thornton stood at the head of the table, his silver hair somehow less intimidating in the morning light. When Angela entered, every head turned toward her. For once, they were all looking at her, really looking. "Ms. Morrison," Dr. Thornton began, and his voice, the voice that had dismissed her a dozen times, held something new. "Please sit down. We owe you more than gratitude. We owe you an apology." Angela sat, and for the first time in 15 years, someone asked her to explain exactly how her mind worked, exactly what she'd seen, exactly what had made an invisible woman the only one who could see the truth. She told them every detail, every observation, every brilliant, overlooked piece of evidence that had been hiding in plain sight. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Dr. Sarah Chen started clapping. And one by one, 20 specialists, the best medical minds in America, joined her, applauding the housekeeper who'd outdiagnosed them all. But Angela wasn't a housekeeper anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was something else entirely. She was seen. The applause died down, but the weight of 20 pairs of eyes remained. Angela's hands trembled in her lap, hidden beneath the conference table's polished surface. She'd prepared for dismissal, for anger, even for disbelief. Recognition felt more dangerous somehow. Dr. Thornton cleared his throat. "Ms. Morrison, your intervention was extraordinary. However, we need to understand the full scope of what happened here. The hospital administration, the FBI, and frankly, our own reputation depends on getting every detail correct." "I understand," Angela said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. "Walk us through it again." Dr. Park leaned forward, his round glasses reflecting the fluorescent lights. "From the beginning, what made you suspect thallium specifically? Angela opened her folder, spreading out her documentation. The fingernails were the first thing, not just yellow, but yellow with that particular waxy quality. I noticed it 3 weeks ago during routine cleaning. Then the hair loss pattern scattered, but not random. Alopecia doesn't present that way. Neither does stress-related loss. You noticed this 3 weeks ago. Dr. Sarah Chen's voice carried an edge Angela couldn't quite identify. Why didn't you say something sooner? The question landed like a physical blow. Angela met Dr. Chen's eyes directly. I tried. I left an anonymous note on Dr. Thornton's clipboard. I approached you personally in the doctor's lounge. I was told to stay in my lane. Silence crashed through the room like a wave. Dr. Chen's face flushed red, and she looked down at her hands. Dr. Thornton's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. The institutional barriers here, Angela continued, her voice gaining strength from somewhere deep inside, made it nearly impossible for someone in my position to be heard. I had to gather proof that couldn't be ignored. That's why I conducted the chemical test. About that test, interrupted Dr. James Morrison. No relation, though the shared surname made Angela's stomach twist oddly. He was the toxicology specialist, 50-ish, with salt and pepper hair and skeptical eyes. You claim you used household materials to detect thallium. That's not standard protocol. Nothing about this situation was standard, Angela replied. I used a modified sodium rhodizonate reaction. The color change was unmistakable. Sodium rhodizonate isn't available in cleaning supplies, Dr. Morrison said flatly. No, but the components to synthesize a crude version are baking soda, iodine, aluminum. Angela pulled out her phone showing the photographs. I documented everything, the precipitate formation, the color progression. It's not lab quality analysis, but it was sufficient for confirmation. Dr. Morrison took her phone, scrolling through images with increasing interest. His skeptical expression shifted to something closer to respect. This is actually quite sophisticated. Where did you learn this technique? Professor Elizabeth Harrison's Advanced Toxicology Seminar, Georgetown, Fall 2006. Beth Harrison. Dr. Morrison's eyebrows shot up. She was my graduate advisor at Georgetown, best toxicologist I've ever known. You studied under her for 1 semester before I withdrew. Beth doesn't take just anyone into her advanced seminars. You must have been exceptional. Dr. Morrison handed back her phone. This methodology is sound, crude, but sound. You should publish this as a case study. Angela almost laughed. I'm a housekeeper. I don't publish case studies. You're not just a housekeeper, Dr. Park said quietly. Not anymore. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Angela felt the room's energy shift, everyone suddenly aware they were witnessing something unprecedented, a complete inversion of hospital hierarchy playing out in real time. Dr. Thornton stood walking to the windows overlooking the Baltimore harbor. His silence stretched uncomfortably long. When he finally turned back, his face was drawn. I need to address something that's been bothering me since last night. Ms. Morrison, you saved Victor Blackwell's life. 20 specialists, myself included, failed to diagnose something you identified through observation alone. That's not just impressive, it's humbling. He paused, and Angela saw genuine struggle in his expression. It's also deeply troubling, he continued, because it means our system is broken. We have protocols, hierarchies, credentials, all designed to ensure quality care. But those same systems prevented us from hearing you when you tried to tell us the truth. We need to talk about that. With respect, Dr. Thornton, Angela said, surprising herself with her boldness, talking about it doesn't change it. I wasn't ignored because my information was wrong. I was ignored because of who I am, or rather, who I'm not. The truth settled over the room like snow, cold, undeniable, coating everything. Dr. Chen spoke up, her voice tight. You're right. I dismissed you. I told you to stay in your lane. I reported you to administration for trying to help. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. We all were, Dr. Park added. The question is, what do we do about it now? Before anyone could answer, the conference room door burst open. Rachel Kim from administration entered, her professional composure slightly cracked. Behind her stood 2 people in dark suits, FBI agents, Angela realized with a jolt. Dr. Thornton, we need Ms. Morrison, the male agent said, flashing credentials. Agent Michael Ramirez, FBI. This is Agent Lisa Chen. We have Jefferson Burke in custody, but we need Ms. Morrison's testimony to build our case. Everything accelerated. Angela found herself in a smaller conference room with the agents a recording device on the table between them, answering questions she'd never imagined asking. "When did you first suspect Jefferson Burke?" Agent Ramirez asked. "I didn't initially. I suspected thallium poisoning first, then worked backward to the delivery method. The hand cream was the obvious vector, Mr. Burke brought it religiously, always the same brand, always insisting it be used. He even applied it himself sometimes to demonstrate its quality. Did you ever see him alone with the cream?" Angela thought back, scrolling through memories of cleaning shifts. "Yes. About 2 weeks ago, I came in early to clean Mr. Blackwell's suite. Mr. Burke was there alone. Mr. Blackwell was sleeping. Burke was at the bathroom counter handling the jar. When he heard me, he startled, then acted casual, said he was just making sure it hadn't separated." Agent Chen leaned forward. "Did you see what he was doing to the jar?" "Not clearly, but his hands, there was white powder on his fingertips. He wiped them on a towel quickly, but I saw it." The agents exchanged glances. "That's very helpful, Ms. Morrison. We found traces of thallium sulfate in Burke's home laboratory. He has a chemistry background, worked in pharmaceutical research before moving into business. He knew exactly what he was doing." Angela's stomach turned. "How long was he poisoning Mr. Blackwell?" "Based on symptom progression and the evidence we've collected, at least 3 months, maybe longer. It was supposed to look like a natural decline, multiple organ systems failing simultaneously. Even if poisoning was suspected, thallium is archaic enough that most doctors wouldn't think to test for it." Agent Ramirez studied Angela. "Which makes what you did even more remarkable. How did you know?" "I didn't know. Not at first. I suspected, then I confirmed." Angela met his eyes. "But honestly, I think being invisible helped. I watched Mr. Burke when he thought no one was looking. I noticed patterns because I had time to notice. Doctors are brilliant, but they're busy. I had 6 weeks of observation, while they had 6 weeks of crisis management." "That's a generous interpretation," Agent Chen said. "Most people would be angry at being dismissed." "Oh, I was angry," Angela admitted. "But anger doesn't save lives. Evidence does." The interview continued for another hour. Details, timelines, observations. Angela's phone photos were copied, her makeshift chemistry documentation photographed. By the time the agents finished, Angela's head was pounding and her mouth was dry. "We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial," Agent Ramirez said as they concluded. "Burke is claiming the thallium contamination was accidental, says the cream manufacturer must have had tainted ingredients, but your testimony about his behavior, combined with the physical evidence, will be crucial." "I'll testify," Angela said. "Whatever you need." Back in the main conference room, the medical staff had dispersed, except for Dr. Park and Dr. Thornton. They stood by the windows deep in conversation that stopped when Angela entered. "Ms. Morrison," Dr. Thornton said, "we've been discussing your situation. Hospital administration has some concerns about how to proceed." Angela's heart sank. Here it comes, she thought. The recognition was nice while it lasted. "The concern is this," Dr. Thornton continued. "You demonstrated expert-level diagnostic skills while employed in a non-medical capacity. That creates a liability issue. If word got out that we had someone with your abilities cleaning floors, instead of contributing to patient care," he paused, "it doesn't reflect well on us." "So I'm being fired?" "No." Dr. Park jumped in. "The opposite. We want to offer you a position in the toxicology department, paid internship while you complete your degree, full-time employment upon graduation." Angela stared at them, certain she'd misheard. "I don't have a degree to complete. I withdrew 15 years ago. Georgetown doesn't just let you waltz back in after me." "We've already contacted Georgetown," Dr. Thornton interrupted. "Explain the situation. They're willing to readmit you with full credit for your previous coursework. The hospital will cover tuition, provide a living stipend, and arrange flexible scheduling around your family obligations." "I have 3 kids. I can't just—" "The stipend covers childcare," Dr. Park added. We've worked out the details. Ms. Morrison, you saved a patient's life using knowledge you've maintained for 15 years without support or recognition. Imagine what you could do with proper resources. Angela's mind reeled. This morning she'd expected to be fired. Now they were offering her a second chance at the career she'd mourned for 15 years. Why? She asked. Why go to all this trouble for a housekeeper? Dr. Thornton's expression was unreadable. Because you're not a housekeeper. You never were. We just couldn't see it. This is us correcting a mistake ours, not yours. Also, Dr. Park added with a slight smile, Victor Blackwell called this morning. Once he's recovered enough to leave the hospital, he wants to meet you. Something about establishing a scholarship foundation. He's very grateful. He should be, Dr. Thornton said quietly. You saved his life when we couldn't. Angela felt tears building behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not yet. I need to think about this. Talk to my kids. This is a big change. Of course. Take a few days. But Ms. Morrison... Dr. Thornton extended his hand. Thank you. For not giving up. For being smarter than all of us. Angela shook his hand, feeling the surreal nature of the moment. This man had walked past her for years without seeing her. Now he was shaking her hand, thanking her, offering her a future. She left the hospital in a daze, driving home on autopilot. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, texts from co-workers who'd heard rumors, calls from reporters who'd gotten her number. Somehow a voicemail from her supervisor asking her to call back urgently. Angela ignored them all. At home, her mother was watching the kids. Denise Morrison looked up from the kitchen table where she was helping Marcus with homework. You're home early. Everything okay? I need to talk to you, Angela said. And the kids, family meeting. 10 minutes later, they were all gathered in the small living room. Angela, her mother, 14-year-old Tasha, 12-year-old Marcus, and 10-year-old Jordan. 3 faces looked at her with varying degrees of concern. So, Angela began, then stopped. How did you tell your children that their entire lives were about to change? Remember how I told you there was a problem at work that I noticed something the doctors missed? You saved that rich guy, Marcus said. It's all over the news. Tyler at school showed me they're saying you're like a superhero or something. It's on the news. Angela reached for her phone, then stopped. Never mind. Listen, because of what happened, the hospital offered me something. A chance to go back to school, to finish my chemistry degree. Tasha's eyes widened. For real? For real. They'll pay for everything: tuition, childcare, living expenses. I'd work part-time in their toxicology lab while studying. After graduation, I'd have a full-time position as a medical toxicologist. Silence. Her mother's expression was unreadable. The kids exchanged glances. But that means things would change, Angela continued. I'd be busier, stressed, studying late nights, less available. You'd have to be more independent, help out more around the house. It's not going to be easy. Mom, Tasha said slowly, you've been cleaning hospitals for 15 years. You work night shifts so you can be home during the day for us. You're exhausted all the time, and you never complain. If someone's finally giving you a chance to do what you're supposed to be doing... She paused, her teenage face suddenly mature beyond her years. We'll be fine. We want you to do this. We'll help, Marcus added. I can cook dinner sometimes. Well, I can learn to cook dinner. I can help too, Jordan piped up. I'm good at cleaning. Angela looked at her mother, who'd been silent through the exchange. Denise had her own opinions about education opportunity and sacrifice. She'd worked 3 jobs to support Angela through high school, had been devastated when Angela dropped out of Georgetown. Mama, Angela asked quietly. Denise's eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Baby girl, I've been waiting 15 years for you to get back to yourself. You think I'm going to let you turn this down? You take that opportunity and you run with it. We'll figure out the rest. Something broke open in Angela's chest, relief and fear and hope all mixed together. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. The next morning, Angela called Dr. Park and accepted the position. Within a week, the machinery of institutional change had kicked into gear. Georgetown processed her readmission. The hospital drew up her new employment contract. Her supervisor, looking slightly shell-shocked, helped transfer her out of housekeeping and into the toxicology department. "You know," Susan said as they cleared out Angela's locker in the housekeeping office, "I always knew you were too smart for this job. But I figured hell we're all too smart for our jobs. Never occurred to me that someone would actually get out." "I got lucky," Angela said, folding her spare uniform. "No." Susan's voice was firm. "You saved a man's life because you paid attention and refused to be ignored. That's not luck. That's you being brilliant and brave." She paused. "I'm going to miss having you around, though. You made the night shifts bearable." Angela hugged her, this woman who'd covered her shifts when her kids were sick, who'd listened to her complain about her aching feet, who'd shared stale cafeteria coffee at 3 a.m. "I'll miss you too." Her first day in the toxicology lab felt like stepping into a parallel universe. The same building, the same hallways, but now she walked through them differently. People nodded at her. Doctors greeted her by name. She wore scrubs instead of her housekeeping uniform, and the weight of that change felt immense. Dr. James Morrison, the toxicology specialist who'd questioned her methodology, became her direct supervisor and mentor. "You've got raw talent," he told her on that first day, "but talent without training is limited. I'm going to work you hard. You ready for that?" "I've been ready for 15 years, Angela replied. He smiled. "Good. Let's start with the basics. Show me how you'd analyze this sample for heavy metal contamination." Angela pulled on gloves and got to work her hands, remembering movements from another lifetime. It felt like coming home, but not everything was smooth. 3 days into her new position, Angela was pipetting samples when she heard familiar voices in the hallway. "I still don't understand why we're bending over backward for her," someone said. "She got lucky once. That doesn't make her qualified." "She spotted something 20 specialists missed," another voice replied. Dr. Chen Angela recognized. "Because she got lucky," the first voice insisted. "Right place, right time, right observations. But she doesn't have the training, the credentials, the experience. We're setting a dangerous precedent." Angela's hands stilled. The voices moved away, but their words lingered like smoke. Dr. Morrison appeared in the doorway. His expression told her he'd heard it too. "Ignore them. You're going to face skepticism. Some people will never accept that someone from housekeeping could be their equal. Prove them wrong with your work." "And if I can't?" Angela asked quietly. "What if they're right? What if I was just lucky? Then you'll fail, and failing is still better than never trying." Dr. Morrison studied her. "But I don't think you were lucky, Angela. I think you were observant, knowledgeable, and brave enough to act when others wouldn't. Those qualities don't disappear just because someone doubts them." That evening, Angela stayed late in the lab reviewing toxicology protocols until her eyes burned. She couldn't afford to be mediocre, couldn't afford to prove the skeptics right. The weight of representation sat heavy on her shoulders. She wasn't just succeeding or failing for herself. She was succeeding or failing for every housekeeper, every janitor, every invisible worker who'd ever been dismissed despite their intelligence. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Ms. Morrison, this is Victor Blackwell. I'm being released from the hospital tomorrow. Would you be available to meet? I'd like to thank you properly." Angela stared at the message. The man whose life she'd saved wanted to meet her. The billionaire who'd been too sick to notice the woman cleaning his room now knew her name. She typed back, "I'd be honored. When and where?" The response came immediately. "My office, downtown, 2 p.m. tomorrow. I'll send a car." A car. Angela almost laughed. A week ago, she'd been taking 2 buses to get to work. Now a billionaire was sending a car for her. The next afternoon, Angela stood outside the gleaming tower that housed Blackwell Innovations, wearing her best dress and fighting the urge to run. The lobby was all marble and glass, the kind of space where her footsteps echoed with presumption. "Ms. Morrison." A young woman in an expensive suit approached. "I'm Jennifer, Mr. Blackwell's assistant. He's expecting you." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, except for soft classical music. Jennifer led her through corridors lined with modern art to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Baltimore. Victor Blackwell stood when she entered. He looked better than the last time she'd seen him, color back in his face hair beginning to regrow hand steady. But he was still thinner still, carried the shadow of someone who'd come too close to death. "Ms. Morrison," he said, his voice stronger than she remembered. "Please sit. Can I offer you anything, coffee, water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Angela sat in the chair across from his desk, hyper-aware of the power dynamics at play. This man was worth billions. She was a housekeeper turned intern. The gap between them was vast. But then Blackwell spoke and the gap narrowed. "I'm told I have you to thank for my life, that you identified thallium poisoning when my own medical team couldn't. I want to understand how that happened." So Angela told him. The observations, the research, the makeshift chemistry test, the institutional barriers that had nearly prevented her from being heard. Blackwell listened without interrupting, his businessman's face revealing nothing. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Jefferson Burke was my friend, or I thought he was. We'd been rivals in the tech industry for decades, but we'd reached a point of mutual respect, or so I believed. The FBI tells me he was poisoning me to force me out before the Nexus merger. He'd have made billions if I'd stepped down." "I'm sorry," Angela said, though she wasn't sure what she was apologizing for. "Don't be. You saved my life. You saw what no one else saw because you were paying attention from a position everyone else ignored." Blackwell leaned forward. "That's what I want to talk to you about. The hospital told me about your situation, your background, your interrupted education, your years in housekeeping. It's unconscionable that someone with your abilities was cleaning floors." "It was honest work," Angela said, defensive despite herself. "It was," Blackwell agreed, "but it wasn't the right work. You're brilliant, Ms. Morrison. Brilliant people should be doing work that challenges them, that uses their full capacity. I want to help make that happen." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was documentation for a scholarship foundation, the Blackwell Foundation for Scientific Excellence. The first recipient would be Angela Morrison, with full funding for her degree completion, living stipend, childcare coverage, and guaranteed employment upon graduation. But that wasn't all. The foundation would extend to other talented individuals whose education had been interrupted by circumstance, who'd been dismissed because of their job titles rather than judged by their abilities. "You inspired this," Blackwell said. "Your story made me realize how much talent we're wasting because we only look for it in expected places. I want to change that." Angela's hands shook as she read through the documentation. Full tuition, living stipend that was more than she'd made in a year of housekeeping, guaranteed childcare, support services, everything she'd needed 15 years ago but hadn't had. "This is too much," she whispered. "It's not enough," Blackwell corrected. "You saved my life, Ms. Morrison. Money can't repay that, but it can help ensure that other people like you, brilliant people, stuck in circumstances beyond their control, get the chances they deserve." Angela looked up at him. This man she'd saved and felt the full weight of what had happened settle over her. One observation, one refusal to stay silent, one moment of courage had changed everything, not just for her, but potentially for dozens, hundreds of others. "Thank you," she managed. "This means... I can't even express what this means." Blackwell smiled. "You don't have to. Just succeed. Show everyone who doubted you that they were wrong, and then help others do the same." They talked for another hour about science, about education, about the barriers that kept talented people trapped in wrong lives. When Angela finally left, stepping back into the elevator with Jennifer, she felt different somehow. Taller, more substantial. The invisible woman was becoming very, very visible, and she wasn't sure yet if that was a blessing or a burden. The media found Angela 3 days after her meeting with Blackwell. She was in the toxicology lab, analyzing blood samples for a suspected arsenic case when Dr. Morrison appeared in the doorway with an uncomfortable expression. "There's a reporter in the lobby asking for you, says she's from the Baltimore Sun, something about a human interest story on the housekeeper who saved a billionaire." Angela's pipette slipped, nearly contaminating her sample. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet." "But Angela, this is going to happen. Your story is out there. Burke's arraignment is next week and the press is all over it. You're part of the narrative whether you want to be or not." Angela closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building like pressure before a storm. But knowing and experiencing were different things. "What should I do?" "That's your call. But if I were you, I'd control the narrative before it controls you. Talk to them on your terms, or they'll fill in the blanks themselves." 30 minutes later, Angela sat in a small conference room across from Jessica Chang, a reporter whose reputation for fairness Angela had verified through frantic Googling. Jessica had kind eyes and a recorder between them on the table. "Miss Morrison, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I know this has been an overwhelming week." "That's an understatement," Angela said, trying for humor and landing somewhere near exhaustion. "Let's start simple. You were working as a housekeeper when you identified Mr. Blackwell's condition. How did someone with no medical credentials make a diagnosis that 20 specialists missed?" Angela chose her words carefully. "I have credentials. They're just not the ones people expect. I was a chemistry student at Georgetown specializing in toxicology before family circumstances forced me to withdraw. I never stopped learning, never stopped reading journals and textbooks. The knowledge was always there. People just didn't think to ask if the woman cleaning their floors had it." "That must have been frustrating." "Frustrating doesn't begin to cover it." Angela felt something crack open inside her, 15 years of suppressed anger finally finding an outlet. "Do you know what it's like to watch doctors discuss differential diagnoses while you're emptying their trash, knowing you could contribute, but also knowing that speaking up would get you fired, to be invisible, not because you're not there, but because your uniform tells everyone not to see you?" Jessica nodded, making notes. "What changed? What made you decide to speak up despite the risks?" "Victor Blackwell was dying, that's what changed. I could lose my job, but he could lose his life. The math was simple." "But you did try to tell people first, didn't you?" "Before you conducted your own test." Angela's jaw tightened. "I left an anonymous note. I approached a doctor directly. I was dismissed both times. The note was laughed at in a staff meeting. The doctor told me to stay in my lane and then reported me to administration. The system isn't designed to hear people like me." "People like you?" "Invisible people. Support staff. The ones who keep hospitals running but aren't supposed to have opinions about medical care." Angela paused, realizing how bitter she sounded. "I'm not trying to criticize the doctors. They're brilliant people doing impossible work. But brilliance has blind spots, and sometimes those blind spots are shaped like class and credentials." Jessica's pen moved faster. "What would you say to other people in similar positions? People with knowledge and talents that aren't being recognized?" Angela thought about Maria, her former co-worker, who'd said, "Nobody listens to us." She thought about the transport worker who'd approached her after her presentation, the one taking night classes in secret. She thought about all the invisible people in hospitals and offices and schools across the country. "Don't stop learning," she said finally. "Don't let anyone convince you that your job title defines your worth or your capabilities. And when you see something that needs to be said, say it. Even if no one listens the first time. Even if they laugh. Say it anyway, because eventually someone will hear you." The article ran on the front page of the Sunday Baltimore Sun. Angela's photo, taken reluctantly after Jessica insisted, showed her in the toxicology lab, pipette in hand, looking more confident than she felt. The headline read, "From Housekeeping to Healing, How Angela Morrison Solved the Case That Stumped Hopkins Best." Her phone exploded. Texts from former coworkers, some congratulatory, some with an edge she couldn't quite identify. Calls from other reporters wanting interviews. Emails from strangers sharing their own stories of being overlooked and dismissed. And one message that made her hands shake. It was from Professor Elizabeth Harrison, her former toxicology professor at Georgetown. "Angela, I just read about what you did. I'm incredibly proud of you, and ashamed that Georgetown and I failed you 15 years ago. I'd like to discuss your return to the program personally. Please call me." Angela stared at the message for 10 minutes before her daughter found her. "Mom, you're crying. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Angela said, wiping her eyes. Professor Harrison remembers me. After 15 years, she remembers me. That night, Angela couldn't sleep. She lay in bed scrolling through emails, reading comments on the online version of the article. Most were supportive, praising her intelligence and courage, but others cut deep. Affirmative action hire. Hopkins is just trying to look good. One lucky guess doesn't make her qualified to work in a lab. This is why credentials matter. Anyone can get lucky once. Angela closed her eyes, but the words remained burned into her mind like brands. She'd known this would happen, had braced for it, but the reality still hurt. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Park. "Ignore the trolls. Your work speaks for itself. See you tomorrow." Another from Dr. Morrison. "Internet comments are where nuance goes to die. Focus on the work." And one from Victor Blackwell. "Haters gonna hate. Lifesavers gonna save lives. You're the latter. Don't forget it." Angela smiled, despite herself set her phone aside, and finally slept. Monday morning brought a new challenge. Angela arrived at the lab to find Dr. Richard Chen waiting, a senior toxicologist she'd met only briefly during her first week. His expression was carefully neutral. "Ms. Morrison, do you have a moment?" They stepped into his office, and Angela's stomach knotted. This felt like a conversation that ended with bad news. "I've been reviewing your work from last week," Dr. Chen began. "The arsenic analysis you completed on the Henderson case." Angela's mind raced through her methodology, searching for errors. "Did I miss something?" "No. Your analysis was flawless. Textbook perfect, actually." He paused. "Which brings me to my concern. You've been in this lab for 2 weeks, Ms. Morrison. 2 weeks. Yet your technical skills are at the level of someone with years of experience. How?" The question hung between them, and Angela understood what he was really asking. How could someone who had been cleaning floors for 15 years suddenly perform expert-level toxicology work? "I never stopped learning," she said quietly. "I read journals during lunch breaks, watched online lectures, worked through problem sets in old textbooks. The knowledge doesn't disappear just because you're not using it professionally." "That's remarkable dedication," Dr. Chen said, but his tone suggested he was still processing whether to believe her. "I'm not questioning your abilities, you understand. I'm questioning how we ensure other staff don't think they can leap from housekeeping to specialized medical work without proper training." There it was, the real concern. Not whether Angela was qualified, but what precedent her success set. Dr. Chen, with respect, "I didn't leap. I climbed. 15 years of self-education maintaining knowledge most people would have forgotten. I earned this position through work that no one saw because no one was looking. I understand that, but optics matter. There are murmurs in the department that you're receiving preferential treatment because of the publicity around the Blackwell case." Angela's hands clenched in her lap. "What would satisfy people that I'm qualified? More tests. More proof. How many times do I have to demonstrate competence before it's accepted?" Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "I don't have a good answer for that. I'm just giving you a heads up that you're going to face scrutiny. Every mistake will be magnified. Every success will be attributed to luck or help. It's not fair, but it's reality." "I know," Angela said. "I've been facing that reality my entire life. At least now I have the chance to prove people wrong." That afternoon, Angela was analyzing a complex mixture of pharmaceutical compounds when she heard raised voices in the hallway. She looked up to see Dr. Sarah Chen, the doctor who'd dismissed her concerns about Blackwell and later apologized, arguing with another physician Angela didn't recognize. "She's qualified, David. More than qualified. She's a charity case. Hopkins feeling guilty about missing an obvious diagnosis. It wasn't obvious. 20 specialists missed it. Because we weren't looking for it. Once you know what to look for, thallium poisoning is straightforward. She got lucky." Angela's hands stilled on her equipment. She should walk away, pretend she hadn't heard. Instead, she stepped into the hallway. "Dr. Chen, do you need something from the lab?" Both doctors turned. Sarah's face flushed with embarrassment. The other doctor, David, had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Ms. Morrison, I apologize. That was unprofessional." It was honest, Angela corrected. And you're right about one thing. Once you know what to look for, thallium poisoning is straightforward. The trick is knowing to look. That requires observation, pattern recognition, and a willingness to consider unlikely possibilities. I had all three because I was paying attention from a position everyone else ignored. She met David's eyes directly. You think I'm a charity case, fine. Think that. But judge me on my work, not on your assumptions about how I got here. If my analysis is wrong, call it out. If my methodology is flawed, correct it. But don't dismiss me because my path doesn't match yours. David opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded curtly and walked away. Sarah remained looking at Angela with a mixture of admiration and guilt. I'm sorry he said that. Don't be. At least he said it to my face instead of behind my back. Angela started to return to the lab, then stopped. Dr. Chen, can I ask you something? When I came to you that night in the doctor's lounge when I told you about the thallium poisoning, what made you dismiss me? Sarah flinched. Honestly, I thought you were overstepping. I thought you were someone who'd read too many crime novels and saw conspiracies where there were just medical mysteries. And I thought... She paused. I thought if I listened to you and you were wrong, I'd look foolish for taking advice from housekeeping staff. And now I know that wisdom doesn't respect hierarchy, and I should have listened to the evidence instead of dismissing the messenger. Sarah met Angela's eyes. I'm trying to be better, to listen better. That conversation changed me. Angela nodded slowly. Good. Because there are a lot more people like me out there. Invisible people with knowledge and insights that could save lives if anyone bothered to listen. That evening, Georgetown called. Professor Harrison herself, not an assistant or administrator. Angela Morrison, I've been hoping you'd call me back. Professor Harrison, Angela's voice caught. I wasn't sure you'd remember me. Remember you, Angela. You were the most talented student in my advanced seminar. When you withdrew, I tried to contact you, tried to find out what happened, but you disappeared. Harrison's voice was thick with emotion. I failed you. The university failed you. We should have done more to support you through your family crisis. You didn't know, Angela said. I didn't tell anyone. I just left. That's the problem. Students shouldn't have to choose between family and education, which is why I want to talk to you about coming back, not just as a regular student, but as a research assistant in my lab, paid position, flexible schedule. And Angela, I want you to present at the National Toxicology Conference next month. Your identification of the Blackwell poisoning using improvised methodology deserves recognition from the scientific community. Angela's breath caught. The National Toxicology Conference was prestigious, attended by the top researchers in the field. Professor, I haven't even completed my degree yet. I'm not... You're exactly qualified. You conducted original analytical work that demonstrated expert-level knowledge. That's what science is, Angela. Not credentials or titles, but the work itself. Will you do it? Angela thought about the comments online about Dr. David's dismissal, about all the people who thought she was a charity case or a publicity stunt. Then she thought about Professor Harrison's belief in her, about Victor Blackwell's foundation, about her daughter saying, "We want you to do this." "Yes," she said. "I'll do it." The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Angela started classes at Georgetown 3 days a week, worked in Hopkins' toxicology lab the other 2 days, and somehow managed to be present for her kids' lives in between. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was everything she'd mourned losing 15 years ago. But the scrutiny intensified. Every paper she wrote was examined with extra care. Every lab result was double-checked. Every opinion she offered was questioned more thoroughly than her colleagues' contributions. "You're being held to a higher standard," Dr. Morrison told her one afternoon when Angela was near tears over a senior researcher who'd torn apart her methodology in a staff meeting. "It's not fair, but it's the price of being exceptional in a space where people think you don't belong." "How do I handle it?" "By being so good they can't ignore you. By doing work so thorough, so rigorous, so undeniably excellent that the doubters have to admit they were wrong." He paused. And by remembering that you've already done that once, you solved a case that stumped the best minds at Hopkins. You've already proven you belong here. Now you're just reminding people of what you've already demonstrated. 3 weeks before the conference, Angela received an unexpected visitor at the lab. A woman in her 60s, well-dressed with intelligent eyes that reminded Angela of someone she couldn't quite place. "Ms. Morrison, I'm Margaret Thornton, Dr. Marcus Thornton's wife." Angela's surprise must have shown because Margaret smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble. I wanted to meet you personally. You see, Marcus came home after your initial diagnosis and did something he rarely does. He cried." Angela didn't know how to respond to that. "My husband is a brilliant physician," Margaret continued, "but he's also stubborn and convinced of his own rightness. You challenged that. You showed him that expertise comes in unexpected packages and that failure to listen can be fatal. He's been different since then, humbler, more open, better." She reached out and squeezed Angela's hand. "Thank you for that. You didn't just save Victor Blackwell's life. You reminded my husband why he became a doctor in the first place." After Margaret left, Angela sat alone in the break room processing the conversation. She thought her impact was limited to one case, one patient, one diagnosis. But ripples spread in ways she hadn't anticipated. Dr. Thornton was listening differently. Dr. Sarah Chen was questioning her assumptions. The hospital was establishing new protocols for hearing concerns from all staff levels. One observation, one refusal to stay silent, one moment of courage was changing an entire institution's culture. But the biggest test was still ahead. The National Toxicology Conference took place in Chicago in a massive hotel with crystal chandeliers and more PhDs per square foot than Angela had ever encountered. She stood in the speaker preparation room, clutching her notes with sweaty hands, while Professor Harrison made last-minute adjustments to her presentation slides. "You're going to be great," Harrison said. "Just speak from your expertise. These are your people, Angela. Scientists who value evidence and methodology over credentials. Some of them are going to dismiss me the moment they see I'm not Dr. Morrison. Let them, then blow them away with your work." Angela walked onto the stage to scattered applause. The room held maybe 200 researchers, all staring at her, with expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. She spotted Dr. Morrison in the third row, giving her an encouraging nod. "Good afternoon. I'm Angela Morrison, and I'm here to discuss field methodology for thallium detection using limited resources." She clicked to her first slide, showing the photo of her makeshift laboratory in the hospital supply closet. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. "This is where I confirmed that Victor Blackwell, a patient at Johns Hopkins, was being systematically poisoned with thallium sulfate, while 20 specialists were treating his symptoms as separate medical conditions." For the next 30 minutes, Angela walked them through her methodology, the initial observations that triggered her suspicion, the chemical analysis performed with improvised equipment, the reasoning behind each decision. She didn't mention being a housekeeper, didn't mention the dismissals she'd faced. She focused purely on the science. When she finished, the room was silent. Then someone in the back stood and started clapping. Others joined until the entire room was on its feet, applauding not her story, but her work. During the Q&A, a distinguished-looking man in his 70s raised his hand. "Dr. Reginald Blackstone, MIT. Ms. Morrison, your methodology was creative but also risky. What if you'd been wrong? What if your improvised test had given a false positive?" Angela met his eyes. "Then I would have been wrong, Dr. Blackstone. But being wrong about a possible poisoning case is better than staying silent and letting a patient die. I accepted the risk to my credibility because the alternative was unacceptable." "But you're not a licensed medical professional. Don't you think there's a reason we have credentialing systems?" "I do. Credentialing ensures baseline competence and protects patients, but it also creates blind spots. Sometimes the answer comes from outside the credentialed space, and we need systems flexible enough to hear those voices without dismissing them out of hand." A woman near the front spoke up. "Dr. Patricia UN Stanford. Ms. Morrison, I want to thank you for this presentation. I've been in toxicology for 30 years, and your work reminds me why I fell in love with this field. Science isn't about credentials. It's about curiosity, rigor, and the courage to pursue truth wherever it leads. You exemplified all three. More applause, more questions. By the time Angela left the stage, she felt wrung out and exhilarated. Professor Harrison was beaming. You nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. But the day wasn't over. That evening at the conference banquet, Angela found herself seated next to Dr. Blackstone, the MIT professor who'd challenged her during Q&A. Ms. Morrison, I hope you didn't take offense at my question earlier. Not at all. It was a fair question. I asked it because I wanted to see how you'd handle pressure, how you'd defend your methodology under scrutiny. He smiled. You did exceptionally well. So well, in fact, that I'd like to offer you a position in my research lab once you complete your degree. Full funding for a PhD program if you're interested. Angela stared at him. You're offering me a PhD position based on one presentation, based on work that demonstrated expert-level knowledge, creative problem-solving, and courage under pressure. Those are the qualities I want in my researchers. The degree is just paperwork. He handed her his card. Think about it. No pressure. But MIT would be lucky to have you. Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Angela called her kids on video chat. They crowded around Tasha's phone, all three faces eager. How'd it go, Mom? Marcus asked. I think it went well. Really well, actually. Did anyone give you trouble? Tasha's protective instincts showed in her narrowed eyes. One person asked tough questions, but in a good way. He was testing me, not dismissing me. There's a difference. You showed them, didn't you? Jordan said, bouncing with excitement. You showed them you're smart. I showed them the work. That's what matters. Angela paused. And guys, something happened. I got offered a PhD position at MIT after I finished my bachelor's degree. Silence. Then Tasha shrieked so loud, Angela had to pull the phone away from her ear. The celebration continued for several minutes before Angela could calm them down. But that's years away still, she reminded them. First, I have to finish at Georgetown, one step at a time. After hanging up, Angela stood at the hotel window looking out at Chicago's lights stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there were other invisible people, other Angela Morrisons cleaning floors and driving buses and stocking shelves while carrying knowledge the world refused to see. Her story wouldn't change all of their lives, but maybe it would change some. Maybe it would make someone listen when the next invisible person spoke up. Maybe it would crack open the door of possibility just wide enough for others to slip through. Angela pressed her hand against the cool glass and made a promise to herself and to all the invisible people she represented. She would succeed, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd been dismissed, overlooked, told to stay in their lane. She would become so undeniably excellent that the world would have no choice but to see her. And once they saw her, they'd start seeing everyone else they'd been trained to overlook. The invisible woman was becoming a force that couldn't be ignored. Angela returned from Chicago to find her world had shifted again. The local news had picked up her conference presentation, and suddenly she wasn't just the housekeeper who saved a billionaire. She was the woman challenging everything people thought they knew about expertise and credentials. Her phone rang at 6 a.m, 2 days after her return. Unknown number, but Angela answered anyway. Ms. Morrison, this is Assistant District Attorney Catherine Webb. I'm prosecuting the Jefferson Burke case. We need to talk about your testimony. Angela sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. What about it? Burke's defense team is going to come after you hard. They're arguing that your diagnosis was amateur speculation that led to a wrongful arrest. They're claiming you had no authority to make medical determinations and that Hopkins acted on faulty information provided by unqualified personnel. And the words hit like physical blows, but the tests confirmed it. The FBI found thallium in his home lab. The evidence is overwhelming, Catherine interrupted, which is why they're attacking the messenger instead of the message. They're going to paint you as an overzealous employee who got lucky and destroyed a man's reputation with circumstantial observations. I need you prepared for that. Angela's hands shook. When's the trial? 3 weeks. I need you to come in this week for prep. Ms. Morrison, I won't lie to you. This is going to be brutal. Burke's lawyers are some of the best money can buy, and they're going to exploit every vulnerability they can find. Your lack of medical credentials, your employment history, the fact that you conducted unauthorized testing on hospital property. So they're going to make me look like the criminal instead of him. They're going to try. Our job is to make sure the jury sees you for what you are, a brilliant scientist who saved a man's life. Can you handle that pressure? Angela thought about Dr. Blackstone's question at the conference, about Dr. David dismissing her as a charity case, about every person who'd ever looked through her like she was furniture. I can handle it. But handling it and surviving it were different things Angela discovered over the next 2 weeks. Catherine Webb put her through practice testimony sessions that felt like interrogations. A junior attorney named Marcus played Burke's defense lawyer, and he was merciless. Ms. Morrison, you have no medical degree, correct? Correct. No nursing credentials? No. In fact, you were employed as a housekeeper. Your job was to clean floors and empty trash, yes? My job was environmental services, but my education and knowledge existed independently of my job title. Conveniently remembered after 15 years of cleaning toilets, wasn't it? Marcus's voice dripped with contempt, and even knowing it was practice, Angela felt her temper flare. My knowledge never disappeared. I maintained it through constant self-education. Self-education, so you read some books and watched some videos, and that qualified you to override the expert opinions of 20 board-certified physicians. I didn't override anyone. I identified a pattern they missed and provided evidence to support my conclusion. Evidence obtained through unauthorized use of hospital materials conducted in a supply closet using methods that would never pass peer review. Isn't it true, Ms. Morrison, that your so-called analysis was nothing more than amateur chemistry that happened to align with what you wanted to find? Angela's voice went cold. I wanted to save a dying man. That's what I found evidence to support. Catherine interrupted. Stop. Angela, you're letting him get to you. That's exactly what Burke's lawyers want. They want you angry, defensive, emotional. Juries don't trust emotional witnesses. How am I supposed to stay calm when they're calling everything I did amateur and unauthorized? By remembering that the truth is on your side. The tests confirmed your diagnosis. Burke had thallium in his possession. Blackwell recovered after treatment. Those are facts they can't dispute, so they're attacking you personally. Don't take the bait. But the practice sessions got worse. Marcus brought up her incomplete degree, her years away from academia, her children. Isn't it true you were desperate for recognition after 15 years of invisibility, that you saw an opportunity to matter and seized it regardless of whether you were actually qualified? Angela walked out of the third session, shaking with rage and hurt. Catherine found her in the bathroom, gripping the sink with white knuckles. I know it's hard, Catherine said quietly, but this is nothing compared to what they'll do in court. They'll dig into your finances, your relationships, your entire life, looking for anything that suggests ulterior motives. That's their job. Their job is to defend a man who tried to murder someone. Their job is to defend their client within the bounds of the law, which means attacking the prosecution's evidence and witnesses. You're a key witness, Angela. Maybe the most important one. If they can discredit you, they can create reasonable doubt. Angela looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles under her eyes from too many late nights studying, new lines around her mouth from stress. She looked exhausted and scared, and she was supposed to convince a jury she was a credible expert in 3 weeks. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. You've already done harder things. You raised 3 kids alone. You maintained expert-level knowledge for 15 years without support. You stood up to institutional dismissal and saved a man's life. This is just one more impossible thing you're going to survive. That night, Angela sat her kids down for a serious conversation. They needed to know what was coming. The trial starts in 3 weeks. It's going to be in the news. Kids at school might say things. People might say things about me. What kind of things? Tasha asked, her protective instincts already triggered. That I'm not qualified, that I made everything up, that I'm looking for attention or money. Angela took a deep breath. They're going to attack my credibility to defend the man who poisoned Mr. Blackwell. That's not fair, Marcus said hotly. You saved his life. Life isn't fair, baby. But truth matters, and we have truth on our side. I just need you prepared for people saying ugly things about your mom." Jordan, only 10, looked close to tears. "Why would people be mean to you when you helped someone?" Angela pulled him close. "Because that's how the legal system works sometimes. The defense attorney's job is to make the jury doubt everything I say. It's not personal, even though it feels personal." "It sounds personal," Tasha muttered. "It's going to be okay," Angela said, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "We're going to get through this together like we get through everything." But 2 days later, the defense team leaked their strategy to the press. The headline in the Baltimore Sun read, "Defense claims Housekeeper's diagnosis was reckless speculation that ruined innocent man's life." The article quoted Burke's lead attorney, Jonathan Whitmore, extensively. Ms. Morrison, however well-intentioned, had no business making medical determinations. Her actions led to my client's arrest, the destruction of his reputation, and irreparable harm to his business relationships.
We intend to show that this entire case is built on the faulty observations of someone playing detective with a patient's life. Angela's phone exploded with calls from reporters wanting comment. Dr. Morrison found her in the lab, staring at her computer screen with tears streaming down her face. "Don't read the comments," he said immediately. "Too late." Angela gestured at her screen. "Half of them think I'm a hero. The other half think I'm a delusional nobody who got lucky and ruined an innocent man's life. Burke isn't innocent. The evidence proves that. The evidence I gathered, using methods they're calling reckless and unauthorized. What if they're right? What if I did overstep? What if... Stop." Dr. Morrison pulled up a chair, forcing Angela to look at him. "Listen to me. I've been a toxicologist for 27 years. I've worked with hundreds of students and colleagues. Your instincts, your analytical skills, your methodology, they're exceptional, not just good, just exceptional. The fact that you maintain that level of expertise through 15 years of working a job that had nothing to do with your training is remarkable. Then why do I feel like a fraud? Because that's what imposter syndrome does. It makes brilliant people doubt themselves, while mediocre people stride forward with unearned confidence." He paused. "Angela, do you know why I was so impressed by your Henderson arsenic analysis?" Angela shook her head. "Because you caught something I missed. A trace contamination in one of the samples that would have thrown off our entire conclusion. You've been here 2 months and you're already catching my mistakes. That's not luck. That's not recklessness. That's expertise." The validation helped, but it didn't stop the anxiety from building as the trial date approached. Angela barely slept, running through testimony in her mind, anticipating every possible attack on her credibility. 1 week before the trial, Victor Blackwell called her directly. "Ms. Morrison, I heard about the defense strategy. I want you to know I'm testifying on your behalf. Whatever they try to do to discredit you, I'll be there to confirm that you saved my life." "Mr. Blackwell, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do. Jefferson Burke tried to murder me and you stopped him. If his lawyers think they can shift blame onto you, they're going to find out how much legal firepower a billionaire can bring to bear." His voice was steel. "You're not alone in this." But Angela felt alone when she walked into the Baltimore Circuit Court on a cold Monday morning in November. The courthouse was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and Burke's supporters who looked at her with open hostility. Catherine Webb met her at the prosecutor's table. "Remember, stay calm, stick to facts, don't let Whitmore bait you. You've got this." Angela nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Across the aisle, Jefferson Burke sat in an expensive suit, looking dignified and wronged. His attorney, Jonathan Whitmore, was a silver-haired man in his 60s, with the kind of face that inspired trust. He was going to destroy her, Angela knew. That's what men like him did to women like her. The jury filed in, 12 people who would decide whether Angela was a hero or a menace. She studied their faces, trying to gauge their thoughts, but they were carefully neutral. The prosecution called their witnesses first: FBI agents who'd found thallium in Burke's home, toxicologists who'd confirmed Blackwell's poisoning,
Dr. Thornton, who testified about the medical team's failure to diagnose the condition. Then it was Angela's turn. Catherine smiled encouragingly as Angela took the stand. "Please state your name for the record." "Angela Morrison." "Ms. Morrison, can you tell the jury about your educational background?" Angela recited her credentials such as they were. Georgetown Chemistry Program. Advanced Toxicology Seminar with Professor Harrison. 3.9 GPA before withdrawal. "Why did you withdraw?" "My parents died in a car accident. I had 3 younger siblings to support. Finishing my degree became impossible." "What did you do after withdrawing?" "I worked. Various jobs to support my family. Eventually, I took a position in environmental services at Johns Hopkins Medical Center." "That's housekeeping, correct?" Angela's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." "Did you maintain your chemistry knowledge during those 15 years?" "I did. I read journals, watched lectures online, worked through textbooks in my spare time. The knowledge never left me." Catherine walked her through the Blackwell case. The observations Angela had made, the pattern she'd recognized, the chemical test she'd conducted, her attempts to alert medical staff, and the dismissals she'd faced. "Why did you persist after being told to stay in your lane?" "Because Victor Blackwell was dying and I knew what was killing him. I couldn't stay silent and watch him die." "Thank you, Ms. Morrison. No further questions." Then Jonathan Whitmore stood, and Angela's heart hammered against her ribs. "Ms. Morrison, you said you maintained your chemistry knowledge for 15 years. That's admirable. But maintaining knowledge and having current practical expertise are different things, aren't they? Knowledge is knowledge. The fundamentals don't change. But application does. Technology advances. Methodologies improve. Isn't it true that your expertise was 15 years out of date? Thallium poisoning hasn't changed in 15 years. The symptoms are the same. The chemistry is the same. How convenient that the one case you inserted yourself into happened to involve a poison from your outdated educational background." Whitmore smiled. "Tell me, Ms. Morrison, how many patients did you diagnose during your time as a housekeeper?" "Objection," Catherine called. "Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's pattern of behavior, Your Honor." "Overruled. The witness will answer." Angela met Whitmore's eyes. 1. Victor Blackwell. 1. Out of how many patients whose rooms you cleaned over 15 years? "I don't know. Thousands, probably." "Thousands of patients, and you diagnosed exactly 1. Doesn't that suggest you were seeing patterns that weren't there? Playing detective with insufficient information?" "No. It suggests that most patients are being treated correctly by their medical teams. Victor Blackwell wasn't, and I recognized why." "Or you got lucky. One lucky guess in thousands of opportunities." Whitmore picked up a document. "Isn't it true that you conducted unauthorized chemical testing using stolen hospital materials?" "I borrowed materials to confirm my hypothesis. I returned everything I used." "Borrowed without permission. That's called theft, Ms. Morrison." "Objection." Catherine was on her feet. "Counsel is testifying." Sustained. Mr. Whitmore asked questions. "Did you have permission to take those materials?" "No." "Did you have permission to conduct chemical tests on patient samples?" "No, but well, yes or no, Ms. Morrison?" "No." "Did you have any medical authority to diagnose Mr. Blackwell's condition?" Angela's hands clenched in her lap. "I had the knowledge to recognize what was happening to him." "That's not what I asked. Did you have medical authority? Were you licensed to practice medicine in Maryland?" "No." "So you were an unlicensed, unauthorized person making medical claims about a patient and conducting illegal chemical tests. Is that accurate?" "That's a distortion of what happened." "Is it? Let's talk about your motivations, Ms. Morrison. You were a housekeeper making, what, $30,000 a year, raising 3 children alone. Financial pressures must have been significant." Angela's stomach dropped. "I wasn't motivated by money." "No, isn't it true that immediately after Mr. Blackwell's recovery, you received a full scholarship, a paid position at Hopkins, and a substantial stipend from the Blackwell Foundation?" "Those came after. They weren't." "How much is the Blackwell Foundation paying you annually?" "Ms. Morrison." Catherine objected, but the judge allowed it. Angela had to answer. $75,000 for living expenses and childcare while I complete my degree. $75,000. That's more than double your previous salary. Quite a windfall for someone who just happened to notice something 20 trained physicians missed. I didn't do it for money, Angela said, her voice shaking with suppressed fury. I did it because a man was dying. Or because you saw an opportunity, a chance to matter, to be recognized, to escape your invisible existence as a housekeeper. Whitmore's voice was gentle understanding, even which made it worse. There's no shame in wanting more for yourself, Ms. Morrison, but let's be honest about your motivations. My motivation was saving a life. Was it? Or was it about being seen? About proving you were smarter than the doctors who'd ignored you for years? Whitmore paused. Isn't it true you approached Dr. Sarah Chen with your theory, and she dismissed you? Yes. And that dismissal made you angry. It made me frustrated that no one would listen. Angry enough to take matters into your own hands, to conduct unauthorized tests, to go over the heads of qualified medical professionals. Whitmore's tone shifted, became harder. Isn't it possible, Miss Morrison, that you were so desperate to be right, to prove the doctors wrong, that you saw evidence where none existed? The evidence existed. The tests confirmed. Tests conducted after you'd already convinced hospital administration to act on your speculation. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Whitmore pulled out another document. Let's talk about your chemical test. You claim you used a sodium rhodizonate reaction to detect thallium, but you don't have access to sodium rhodizonate, do you? I synthesized a version using available materials. You synthesized it in a supply closet using cleaning supplies. Whitmore's skepticism was palpable. Ms. Morrison, can you walk the jury through exactly how you synthesized sodium rhodizonate from baking soda and iodine? Angela explained her chemistry knowledge solid even under pressure. But Whitmore interrupted repeatedly, picking apart details, questioning assumptions, making it sound like she was making things up as she went along. And you expect this jury to believe that your improvised, unauthorized, unwitnessed chemical test in a supply closet is reliable evidence? It was sufficient to confirm my hypothesis. The hospital then conducted proper tests that validated my findings. After you'd already set events in motion, after you'd already convinced them to treat Mr. Blackwell based on your untested speculation. Whitmore leaned in. Ms. Morrison, isn't it true that if you'd been wrong, you could have killed Victor Blackwell by convincing doctors to administer inappropriate treatment? The question hung in the air like poison. Angela felt the jury's eyes on her, weighing whether she was a hero or a reckless amateur who'd gotten lucky. If I'd been wrong, Angela said slowly, then the hospital's tests would have shown that. They would have stopped treatment immediately. But I wasn't wrong. The tests confirmed thallium poisoning. Jefferson Burke had thallium in his possession, and Victor Blackwell recovered after appropriate treatment. Those are facts, not speculation. Facts interpreted through the lens of someone desperate to matter. Whitmore smiled. No further questions. Angela left the stand on shaking legs. Catherine squeezed her shoulder as she sat down, but Angela couldn't tell if she'd helped or hurt their case. The trial continued for 3 more days. Victor Blackwell testified, his recovery and gratitude evident. FBI agents presented damning evidence from Burke's home. Medical experts confirmed the poisoning and treatment. But Whitmore's closing argument kept returning to Angela. The prosecution wants you to believe that an untrained housekeeper made a diagnosis that 20 specialists missed. That's not heroism, ladies and gentlemen. That's recklessness. Ms. Morrison may have been lucky this time, but we don't convict people based on luck. We convict based on evidence, and the evidence here is tainted by the unauthorized, unprofessional actions of someone who had no business inserting herself into medical care. Catherine's closing countered. The defense wants you to ignore the fact that Angela Morrison was right, that her knowledge, however unconventionally applied, saved a man's life. They want you to focus on her credentials instead of her accuracy. But science doesn't care about credentials. Truth doesn't care about job titles. Angela Morrison identified thallium poisoning through brilliant observation and analytical thinking. Everything that came after confirmed her diagnosis. That's not luck. That's expertise.
The jury deliberated for 2 days. Angela spent them in agony, unable to eat or sleep, convinced she'd ruined everything. When the verdict came, she sat in the courtroom with her hands clasped so tightly her fingers went numb. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Angela's breath left her in a rush. Guilty. The jury had believed her, had believed the evidence over Whitmore's attacks on her credibility. Burke's face went white. Whitmore immediately called for appeal, but it was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Angela stood at the microphone with Catherine beside her, trying to find words. I'm grateful the jury saw the truth. Jefferson Burke tried to murder Victor Blackwell, and justice has been served. I hope this case shows that expertise comes in many forms, and that we all benefit when we listen to voices we might otherwise dismiss. Ms. Morrison, do you feel vindicated after the defense's attacks on your credibility? Angela paused, thinking about Whitmore's questions about every person who'd called her reckless or lucky or desperate. I feel relieved that the truth came out. The attacks on me were never about me personally. They were legal strategy. I understand that. But I hope people remember that dismissing someone because of their job title or educational background can have real consequences. If the doctors at Hopkins had listened to me sooner, we could have saved Victor Blackwell weeks of suffering. That soundbite played on every news channel that evening. Angela watched it with her kids, all of them crowded on the couch, like they used to do when money was tight and cable was a luxury. You did it, Mom, Tasha said quietly. You actually did it. Angela pulled her close. We did it. I couldn't have survived any of this without you three supporting me. Her phone buzzed. A text from Professor Harrison. Congratulations. The defense tried to break you and failed. That's the mark of a true scientist. See you Monday for lab work. Another from Dr. Morrison. Verdict was never in doubt. Truth has a way of winning. Well done. And one from Victor Blackwell. Thank you for not giving up. On me, on yourself, or on the truth. The world is better because you refuse to stay invisible. Angela set her phone aside and closed her eyes, letting the weight of the past months finally settle. She'd been tested in ways she'd never imagined. Attacked, doubted, torn apart in court and in the media. But she'd survived. More than survived. She'd proven that knowledge transcends credentials, that observation matters more than hierarchy, that one person refusing to stay silent can change everything. The invisible woman had become undeniable, and there was still so much work to do. The morning after the verdict, Angela woke to her phone ringing at 5:30. She fumbled for it in the darkness, expecting reporters, or maybe another attorney with questions. Ms. Morrison, this is Janet Rodriguez from Good Morning America. We'd love to have you on the show tomorrow to discuss your story. We can fly you to New York tonight, put you up in a hotel, have you back home by tomorrow afternoon. Angela sat up suddenly awake. Good Morning America. I'm not sure America needs to hear your story. The housekeeper who outsmarted 20 doctors and caught a murderer. It's inspirational. Please consider it. After hanging up, Angela stared at the ceiling. Good Morning America. National television. Millions of viewers. The invisible woman becoming hypervisible in ways that terrified her. Her phone rang again. CNN, then NPR, then 3 more morning shows. By 6 a.m., Angela had 7 interview requests and a headache building behind her eyes. She called Catherine Webb. They want me on television. All of them. What do I do? That's your choice. But Angela, you have a platform now. You could use it to help people like you. Or you could let the media cycle move on and return to your life. Neither answer is wrong. Angela thought about the transport worker who'd approached her after the hospital presentation, the one taking secret nursing classes. She thought about Maria saying nobody listens to us. She thought about all the invisible people who needed to know their voices mattered. I'll do 1 interview. Good Morning America. That's it. The next evening, Angela stood in the green room of Good Morning America's studio in New York, her hands sweating and her heart racing. A makeup artist had done something to her face that made her look polished and professional. She wore a borrowed blazer because she didn't own one appropriate for national television. You're going to be great, the producer assured her. Robin is wonderful. Just be yourself and tell your story. But which self? Angela wondered. The exhausted housekeeper. The chemistry prodigy. The mother struggling to hold everything together. She contained multitudes, and America wanted a simple narrative. Robin Roberts smiled warmly as Angela sat across from her on the bright studio set, cameras pointed at them like weapons. Angela tried not to think about millions of people watching. Angela Morrison, thank you for being here. Your story has captivated the nation. A housekeeper who saved a billionaire's life by spotting what 20 specialists missed. How did you do it? Angela took a breath. I paid attention. That's really what it comes down to. I watched Victor Blackwell deteriorate for weeks, and I recognized a pattern from my chemistry education that the medical team didn't see because they weren't looking for it. But you hadn't used that education professionally in 15 years. How did you maintain that knowledge? I never stopped learning. I read medical journals during lunch breaks, watched online lectures, worked through textbooks at home after my kids were asleep. Knowledge doesn't disappear just because you're not using it in a traditional professional setting. Your story raises important questions about who we listen to and why. You tried to tell doctors what you'd observed, and they dismissed you. What was that like? Angela met Robin's eyes. It was frustrating and heartbreaking. I knew I was right, but my job title made me invisible. The doctors saw my uniform, not my mind. That's not unique to hospitals. It happens everywhere. We've created systems that only hear certain voices, and we're all poorer for it. What would you say to other people who feel invisible in their jobs? Don't stop learning. Don't let anyone convince you that your worth is defined by your title. And when you see something that needs to be said, say it anyway. Even if no one listens the first time, keep saying it until someone hears you, because what you know matters. The interview continued for 12 minutes. Angela talked about her kids, her interrupted education, the trial. When it ended, Robin hugged her and whispered, "You're going to change lives with this story. I hope you know that." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Angela's phone exploded with messages, emails from people sharing their own stories of being dismissed, job offers from hospitals wanting to hire her, speaking requests from universities and medical conferences, marriage proposals from strangers, death threats from people who thought she was lying or seeking attention. "Turn off your phone," Dr. Morrison advised when she returned to the lab the next day. "You can't read all of it. It'll drive you crazy." But Angela couldn't stop reading. Each message was a person, a story, a life touched by what she'd done. A janitor in Seattle who'd identified a gas leak doctors thought was panic attacks. A receptionist in Atlanta who'd spotted signs of child abuse a pediatrician had missed. A cafeteria worker in Denver who'd recognized symptoms of a rare neurological condition. Invisible people everywhere using knowledge the world didn't know they had. "We need to do something with this," Angela told Professor Harrison during their weekly lab meeting at Georgetown. "All these people reaching out, sharing their stories. There's something here. What are you thinking?" "A program, a way to bridge the gap between support staff and medical teams. Training for non-clinical personnel in basic observation skills. Protocols for how to escalate concerns without being dismissed. Something systemic." Professor Harrison leaned back in her chair, studying Angela. "That's ambitious. It would require buy-in from hospital administration medical staff unions. The politics alone would be nightmarish. But it would save lives." "Yes," Harrison agreed. "It would. Let's figure out how to make it happen." Over the next 3 months, Angela built her proposal while juggling coursework, lab work, and single parenthood. The Blackwell Foundation provided additional funding for research and program development. Dr. Thornton, still carrying guilt from his initial dismissal of Angela, championed the program within Hopkins. But not everyone was supportive. "This is ridiculous," Dr. Richard Chen said during a hospital board meeting Angela attended. "We're going to train housekeepers to diagnose patients now. That's not their job. We have protocols for a reason." "The protocols failed in Mr. Blackwell's case," Angela replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm not suggesting we train support staff to diagnose. I'm suggesting we train them to observe and report, and train medical staff to listen without dismissing concerns based on job titles. That's a solution looking for a problem. One case doesn't establish a pattern."
I've received over 300 messages from non-clinical staff across the country who've identified medical issues their institutions missed. 300 cases, Dr. Chen. That's a pattern." The room fell silent. Angela pulled out her documentation letters and emails from janitors and receptionists and transport workers who'd saved lives by paying attention. "This isn't about undermining medical expertise," Angela continued. "It's about recognizing that observation is a skill that transcends job titles. Support staff spend hours with patients, often more time than physicians do. They see patterns. They notice changes. Currently, we're ignoring that valuable data because of hierarchical assumptions. My program would formalize what's already happening informally and ensure those observations reach the people who can act on them." Dr. Thornton spoke up. "Angela's right. We failed Victor Blackwell because we didn't listen to someone who had critical information. If we'd had protocols in place for escalating concerns from all staff levels, we could have diagnosed him weeks earlier. I support this program." The vote was close, but the program passed. The Observation and Reporting Initiative would launch as a pilot at Johns Hopkins, with potential expansion to other hospitals if successful. Angela threw herself into development. She created training modules, wrote protocols, consulted with medical staff and support workers. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and exactly what she'd wanted to do since she was 19 years old. But success brought new challenges. 6 months after the trial, Angela was in the Hopkins cafeteria grabbing lunch when she heard familiar voices from the next table. "She's everywhere now. Magazine covers, conferences, interviews. It's getting ridiculous. I heard she's charging $50,000 for speaking engagements." "Of course she is. This was always about money and attention. She solved one case and now she's a celebrity." Angela's appetite disappeared. She recognized the voices 2 residents she'd worked with in the toxicology lab. People she'd thought respected her. She stood up her tray untouched and walked to their table. Both residents looked up, faces flushing with guilt. "For the record," Angela said quietly, "I charge nothing for speaking engagements. Every dollar goes to the Blackwell Foundation to support other people whose education was interrupted. And I didn't ask for any of this attention. I just wanted to save a life. But if this visibility helps other invisible people get heard, then I'll accept it." She walked away before they could respond, her hands shaking with suppressed emotion. In the bathroom, she splashed water on her face and stared at her reflection. The woman looking back at her wore nice clothes, now had her hair professionally styled, carried herself with confidence she'd had to learn. But underneath, she was still the terrified single mother who'd cleaned these floors wondering if she'd ever matter. Her phone buzzed, a text from Tasha. "Mom, I got into Georgetown early admission full scholarship." Angela's legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the bathroom floor, crying with relief and joy. Her daughter, her brilliant, determined daughter who'd watched Angela struggle and decided to fight for her own education. She called immediately. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. I wrote my essay about you," Tasha said, her voice thick with emotion, "about watching you never give up on learning even when life gave you every reason to quit. They said it was the best essay they'd received this year. You did that yourself, your intelligence, your hard work. Mom, I did it because you showed me it was possible. You could have stayed invisible. You could have kept cleaning floors and been safe, but you didn't. You fought and you won. That's what I'm going to do too." After hanging up, Angela remained on the bathroom floor for several minutes, processing how completely her life had changed. 2 years ago, she'd been emptying trash cans and worrying about making rent. Now her daughter was going to Georgetown, her program was launching at Hopkins, and she was 6 months from completing her bachelor's degree. But the pressure was immense. Every paper she wrote was scrutinized more carefully than her classmates' work. Every lab result was double-checked. Every opinion she offered was questioned. She existed under a microscope with people waiting for her to fail and prove she'd been lucky all along. "You're carrying too much," her mother said one evening when Angela was studying at the kitchen table at midnight, dark circles under her eyes. "You're going to break." "I can't break. Too many people are watching. If I fail, it proves them right that I was just a lucky housekeeper who should have stayed in her place."
Baby, you're human. Humans need rest, need balance. You're trying to be perfect, and perfect isn't sustainable. But Angela couldn't slow down. There was always another paper to write, another lab result to analyze, another speaking engagement to prepare for. She was running on caffeine and determination, and the terror that if she stopped moving, she'd fall apart. The breaking point came during finals week of her senior year at Georgetown. Angela was in the library at 2 a.m., struggling through advanced biochemical analysis, when the words on the page started swimming. Her heart raced. Her hands went numb. She couldn't breathe. Panic attack. She'd read about them but never experienced one. Now she sat in the Georgetown library, having what felt like a heart attack, unable to catch her breath, convinced she was dying. A security guard found her 20 minutes later, still hyperventilating. He called an ambulance. Angela spent 4 hours in the emergency room getting tests that showed nothing physically wrong. Anxiety and exhaustion, the doctor said. You're running yourself into the ground, Ms. Morrison. Your body is telling you to stop. But stopping felt impossible. She had finals in 3 days, a presentation at a medical conference in a week, lab results to analyze, a program to run. Professor Harrison came to visit her that afternoon, pulling a chair next to Angela's hospital bed with a stern expression. You're going to kill yourself trying to prove you deserve to be here. I have to prove it. If I don't, everyone who said I was lucky or unqualified wins. Angela, you've already proven it. You graduated with highest honors. Your research on field detection methods has been published in 3 peer-reviewed journals. Your program at Hopkins is being adopted by 5 other hospitals. You've proven yourself 10 times over. The only person who still doubts you is you. Angela stared at the ceiling, tears sliding down her temples. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail and prove they were right all along? Then you fail and try again. That's what everyone else does. You're not required to be perfect, Angela. You're just required to be competent and keep learning, which you already are. But I'm representing everyone like me. If I fail, you're not responsible for every invisible person in America. You're responsible for doing your best work and taking care of yourself. That's it. Everything else is extra. The panic attack forced Angela to reassess. She cut back on speaking engagements. She learned to say no to interview requests. She prioritized sleep over perfection and family time over constant productivity. It was hard. Every declined opportunity felt like letting someone down. But slowly, the constant anxiety eased. She could breathe again. 3 weeks before graduation, Victor Blackwell invited Angela to dinner at an expensive restaurant in downtown Baltimore. She arrived to find not just Blackwell, but Dr. Thornton, Professor Harrison, and Dr. Morrison waiting. What's going on? Angela asked, suddenly nervous. Blackwell smiled. We wanted to do this in person. Angela, your observation and reporting initiative has been so successful at Hopkins that the Blackwell Foundation is funding a national expansion. We're partnering with 20 hospitals across the country to implement your program. Angela sat down heavily. 20 hospitals. More if the pilot results continue to be positive. But that's not all. Blackwell slid a folder across the table. Johns Hopkins is creating a new position, Director of Clinical Observation and Patient Safety. It's yours if you want it, after you complete your master's degree, which Hopkins is prepared to fund. You'd be overseeing program implementation training staff and serving as a liaison between clinical and non-clinical personnel, Dr. Thornton added. You'd report directly to the chief medical officer. It's a senior leadership position, Angela. Angela opened the folder, saw the salary listing, and nearly choked. This is more than most senior physicians make. You're worth it, Professor Harrison said simply. Your program is going to save lives, Angela, potentially thousands of lives. That has value. What about MIT? Angela asked. Dr. Blackstone offered me a PhD position. MIT will be there if you want it later, but right now you have an opportunity to implement systemic change at a national level. That doesn't come along often. Dr. Morrison leaned forward. Angela, you could spend 5 years in a lab doing excellent research, or you could spend 5 years changing how hospitals operate across America. Both are worthwhile. Only you can decide which matters more.
Angela thought about all the messages she'd received from invisible people, about the transport worker taking secret nursing classes, about Maria saying nobody listens to us, about every person who'd been dismissed because of their uniform instead of heard because of their insight. "I want to change the system," she said. "Research can wait." On graduation day, Angela walked across the stage in her cap and gown with her 3 children screaming in the audience. At 41, she was older than most graduates, her path unconventional, her journey marked by detours others hadn't faced. But she'd made it. Professor Harrison presented her diploma with tears in her eyes. "Angela Morrison, Bachelor of Science in Chemistry, summa cum laude. I've been teaching for 35 years, and you're one of the finest students I've ever had the honor to work with." The auditorium erupted in applause. Angela clutched her diploma and scanned the crowd until she found her family. Her mother was crying. Her kids were on their feet cheering. And in the back, she spotted Dr. Thornton, Dr. Morrison, and several other Hopkins staff who'd come to support her. At the reception afterward, a young woman approached Angela hesitantly. She wore a maintenance uniform and looked terrified. "Ms. Morrison, I'm Rachel Chen. I work housekeeping at Georgetown Hospital. I've been taking night classes in nursing, but nobody knows. I'm too scared to tell anyone." Angela took her hands. "Why scared? Because what if I'm not good enough? What if people laugh? You were brave enough to speak up, but I don't know if I can be." "Rachel, I was terrified too. I'm still terrified most days. But being scared doesn't mean you're not capable. It means you're doing something that matters." Angela squeezed her hands. "Tell someone. Tell your supervisor, tell your professors. Stop hiding. Your knowledge has value. What if they dismiss me like they dismissed you? Then you keep talking until someone listens, because you know what's worse than being dismissed, staying silent and wondering what you could have accomplished if you'd been brave enough to try." Rachel nodded, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for showing us it's possible." After she left, Angela's mother appeared with champagne. "A toast to my daughter, who never gave up, even when giving up would have been easier." They clinked glasses, and Angela let herself feel the moment. The weight of the diploma in her bag, the scratch of the cap and gown, the knowledge that she'd fought for this and won. "Mom," Marcus said, appearing with Tasha and Jordan, "people keep asking us what it's like having you as a mother. What should we tell them?" Angela considered the question. "Tell them it's complicated. Tell them I'm not perfect. I work too much, I'm stressed too often, and I still don't know what I'm doing half the time. But tell them I never gave up on learning, and I taught you to never give up either." "We're telling them you're a badass," Tasha said with a grin. "Is that okay?" Angela laughed, the sound startling her with its genuine joy. "Yeah, that's okay too." 6 months later, Angela stood in a hospital auditorium in Seattle, addressing 200 support staff workers and medical personnel. Her program was launching at Seattle General, the 8th hospital to adopt it. "Observation is not the same as diagnosis," she explained. "We're not asking housekeepers to practice medicine. We're asking them to report what they see, and we're asking medical staff to listen without dismissing concerns based on job titles. This is about creating communication pathways that currently don't exist." A hand went up, a doctor in his 50s with skeptical eyes. "What if support staff report things that waste our time? We're already overwhelmed." Then you evaluate the concern and move on, just like you do with any other information. But consider this: Victor Blackwell's care cost Hopkins over $2 million during his 6-week decline. If someone had listened to me in week 3, they could have saved 4 weeks of unnecessary treatment and suffering. Dismissing a concern takes 30 seconds. Missing a diagnosis costs time, money, and potentially lives. Another hand. "What qualifies support staff to make these observations?" Angela smiled. "The same thing that qualifies anyone: the ability to notice patterns and recognize when something is wrong. You don't need a medical degree to see that a patient who could walk yesterday can't walk today. You need eyes and attention. Support staff have both. We're just creating a system that values what they see." The training took all day. By evening, Angela was exhausted but satisfied.
The hospital's chief medical officer pulled her aside as people filtered out. "That was impressive. You've got a gift for making complex concepts accessible." "I've had practice explaining myself to people who don't want to listen," Angela said wryly. "Well, Seattle General is lucky to have your program. I'm already thinking about how to expand it beyond our initial pilot." On the flight home, Angela reviewed her schedule for the next month. 3 more hospital implementations. A keynote address at a patient safety conference, meetings with the Blackwell Foundation about expanding funding, graduate classes starting at Johns Hopkins for her master's degree. Her phone buzzed, an email from Dr. Reginald Blackstone at MIT. "Angela, the PhD position is still available whenever you're ready. No pressure, but I wanted you to know we're still interested." Angela smiled and filed the email in a folder labeled Future Possibilities. Maybe someday. But right now, she had work to do. 2 years after saving Victor Blackwell's life, Angela stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., testifying before a congressional committee on healthcare reform. The room was packed with legislators, lobbyists, and media. "Invisible people keep our institutions running," Angela said, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "They clean our hospitals, transport our patients, prepare our food. They're there every day watching and listening and noticing things that the credentialed experts miss because they're too busy or too focused on their specialized areas. My program has now been implemented in 43 hospitals across 12 states. In that time, support staff observations have led to 17 early diagnoses, prevented 12 medication errors, and identified 3 cases of elder abuse. That's measurable impact from people who were previously dismissed as unqualified to contribute to patient care." A senator leaned forward. "Ms. Morrison, your story is inspiring, but how do we scale this nationally? How do we change institutional culture across thousands of hospitals?" "By recognizing that expertise exists everywhere, not just in credentialed spaces. By creating formal protocols that value observation regardless of who's doing the observing. And by training both medical and non-medical staff in effective communication across hierarchical barriers." Angela paused. "But mostly by admitting that our current system is broken. We're wasting human capital by only listening to certain voices. That's not just unfair, it's inefficient and dangerous." The testimony made national news. Angela's program received federal funding for expanded implementation, and the invisible people kept reaching out, sharing their stories, finally believing their voices mattered. On a quiet Sunday evening, 3 years after everything changed, Angela sat on her couch with her kids watching a movie. Marcus was 16 now, talking about colleges. Tasha was finishing her first year at Georgetown, thriving in the chemistry program. Jordan, at 13, had decided he wanted to be a doctor who listens to everyone. "Mom, do you ever regret it?" Tasha asked during a commercial break. "Everything you went through after saving Mr. Blackwell, the trial, the scrutiny, the pressure." Angela considered the question carefully. "Regret, no. It was hard and sometimes I wanted to quit, but I got to finish my education. I got to create something that helps people. I got to show you 3 that intelligence and determination can overcome almost any obstacle. How could I regret that? But you gave up a normal life. You're always traveling, always working. You could have just stayed quiet and kept your housekeeping job and had an easier time." "Easier isn't better, baby. And I was never going to have a normal life. I've never been normal." Angela pulled Tasha close. "I was a Black woman with interrupted education working a job that made me invisible. That's not normal. That's systemic inequality. The only question was whether I'd accept it or fight it. I chose to fight. And yeah, fighting is exhausting. But at least I'm fighting for something that matters." Her phone rang. Victor Blackwell calling to discuss the Foundation's next initiative scholarship programs for children of support staff workers. "Duty calls," Angela said, standing up. "Pause the movie. I'll be back in 15. She stepped onto the balcony of their new apartment, not luxury, but comfortable with enough space for everyone and windows that let in light. Below, Baltimore stretched out in evening shadows and streetlights. "Victor, tell me about this new program." As they discussed logistics and funding and impact, Angela reflected on how completely her world had transformed. She'd gone from invisible to unavoidable, from dismissed to sought after, from housekeeper to healthcare innovator. But the core of who she was hadn't changed. She was still the woman who noticed patterns others missed, still the mother who'd do anything for her children, still the scientist who believed in evidence and observation and the power of speaking truth even when no one wanted to listen. She just learned to be all those things loudly instead of quietly. After hanging up with Blackwell, Angela remained on the balcony for a few more minutes, letting the evening air cool her face. Inside, she could hear her kids laughing at something on TV. Tomorrow, she'd fly to Houston for another hospital implementation. Next week, congressional testimony on healthcare accessibility. Next month, keynote address at a medical conference where she'd be introduced as Director Morrison, not Ms. Morrison, the former housekeeper. The transformation was complete. The invisible woman had become impossible to ignore, and every single day, somewhere in America, another invisible person would notice something important and choose to speak up because Angela Morrison had shown them it was possible. That was legacy enough. Angela turned back toward the light and laughter of her home, toward the life she'd built through observation and courage, and refusing to accept that her voice didn't matter. She'd been invisible once. She would never be invisible again. And neither would anyone else. She could help find their voice, their courage, their undeniable right to be seen and heard and valued for the brilliant, essential people they'd always been. The work would continue. The fight would continue. But tonight she would watch a movie with her kids and remember that every revolution starts with one person deciding that enough is enough, that silence is no longer acceptable, that the invisible deserve to be seen. Angela Morrison had made that decision, and she'd changed the world because of it.